It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take command. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. The podcast twice weekly. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And we are live on the radio today as well. 106.7 The Fan and the Team 980. Thanks for checking us out on your radio or the Odyssey app. By the way, you can also subscribe to the podcast on the Odyssey app. You know that, Logan?
I didn't know that. Actually, we've talked about that before, so I did know that.
I was about to say, that means you don't pay attention to me ever when I talk about where you can get this show, but that's fine. If you want to watch us, you can, youtube.com/@1067 The Fan. I also post up highlights on my channel at Craig Hoffman. All right. We are doing defensive rankings today, taking a look at the defensive positions in the NFC East, going through the defensive tackles, the edges, the linebackers. We've done the safeties as well. If you missed any of those four, you can either rewind on the Odyssey app or just check out the podcast. That's the beauty of the podcast. It's on demand. That's what we are, a podcast. We just happen to be on the radio today. But we're going to hit the corners to wrap up in the final 10 minutes here, Logan. And this is another position where there is a ton of talent. And I think some of the best players on the defensive side in the division actually reside at this position. And that is both established guys and guys who could break out, including obviously the first round pick here in Washington.
Yeah. And this is a really tough group because you got guys kind of there's two types here, right? Guys that are really established that have like a long track record of being successful. And obviously you have two first round picks coming into the division, Deontay Banks and obviously Emmanuel Forbes.
Yep.
So Banks is up in New York, obviously. So I look at this and I say to myself, like, I guess if again, today, I have to say today, which is, the day before 4th of July or whatever, like who it's going to be. And, no one's played any meaningful football from those young guys. I think I'm going to just lean older guys ever so slightly.
I would too.
And if that's the case, I'm going to go Philly 1. I think Dallas 2. Gilmore and Diggs are really a talented duo. I think Gilmore hopefully will kind of chill Diggs out a little bit if you're a Dallas fan. And kind of, again, one of the things that Diggs brings is that tremendous turnover ability, but also take a little bit of that gambler out and kind of make him make some educated guesses there. So I think I'd probably go 2 there. And then it's tough, man. Like it's because really I'd probably go Washington 3 because I think they have Benjamin St-Juste obviously is a starting caliber corner. Fuller's a starting caliber corner. And I think when you look at the Giants, for example, they have Adoree Jackson who has been a little inconsistent the past 2 years, injuries and things like that. But
basically his whole career has been inconsistent.
Yes, and very talented, obviously, when he's healthy. And then Banks is going to be the other starting corner. So I think if I had to give an order, I think that's probably what I do, which is weird because I thought that would be the most challenging group to do. But actually some of the edge rusher was probably more challenging. Linebackers was tough just because there's not like this definitive body of work with those groups. Here it's like, yeah, the corners in Dallas have been super productive. The corners in Philly have been very productive. And then obviously the two remaining groups are Washington and New York.
I think I go Philly first because of
that's what I mean. I'm going Philly first too.
Yeah. No, I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
Because you have everything there. You have established veteran excellence. I mean, true excellence in Darius Slay and James Bradbury. Those are two of the best 10 corners in football, 15 corners in football.
Yeah, I mean, depending who you talk to, I'd say 10, like maybe 10 to 15 for sure.
Avonte Maddox, when healthy, is as good as it gets in the nickel. And then you've got some high upside guys like Greedy Williams, former high draft pick. Does he get to learn from guys like Slay and Reddick and develop into what people thought he could be coming out of LSU? And Kelee Ringo was thought to be, when he got to Georgia as a freshman, like this dude's a future top 10 pick. He winds up sliding way down for legitimate reasons. His play did not, hold up of that over time. But again, this is kind of why everyone freaked out with Philly around the draft. Everyone looked at the guys they took and said, those are super talented players who needed to go to the right place so that they could develop. And then they land in Philadelphia, where there's all this veteran leadership, where there's all this culture, where there's all this everything you could possibly want to incubate talent. And, we're doing this for this year, but like, if all of a sudden next year Slay or at least one of them is gone, which I think is very likely based off cap stuff, But if not both of them are gone, Slay and Bradbury, are Williams and Ringo the replacements that all of a sudden come in ready to play in year 2 in that system, and they're there for the next half decade. Like, these are
Yeah,
the kinds of ways of roster building where Philly's putting at least pieces in place to be good for a long time potentially, which is obviously really important now that they paid their quarterback a ton of money. That's the plan, to be
yeah,
competitive for as long as that Hurts contract is around. And how do you do it? By taking big swings, building a culture that can help you hit as many of those as possible. And ultimately, we'll see. That said, one of those corners goes down, and Greedy Williams has to play this year, and he's the inconsistent football player he's been so far in the NFL.
sure.
And maybe it's not quite as good. Not that there's a ton of depth in this division elsewhere. That's the nature of things. When you lose a starter, you probably don't have a starter waiting to go. And that's when that happens in the season could be a determining factor. But ultimately, I think Bradbury and Slay are the two best in the division, probably overall. Like, I think they're the two best corners in the division,
Yeah.
pending Forbes or Banks coming in as a rookie and being incredible. And so I'd put them 1, Dallas 2. I think I agree with you. Washington 3, and then New York 4. We can go into any of those 3, but I think that's kind of where I sit with Philly.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree. I think Philly is, because of those two guys at the top, obviously, they kind of have an edge, but they also have done a good job of kind of making sure there's depth pieces here, much like Washington's done. Washington every single year does a good job of having guys on the roster that are good football players. And I think, Dallas bringing Gilmore is an excellent addition for them. And yeah, so I think that's probably it. I got a question for you, Craig. Got a couple minutes left. So based on this, and maybe this is a whole show, but for the last 5 minutes, based on these rankings, who do you think the best total defense is? Right. That's my thought. Like, kind of working through this.
Yeah. So I'm going to counter your question a bit with a question, and then we
Sure,
can
go for
dive
it.
into the answer. Because I thought about this. I was like, what do we do if we need more time and these position rankings don't take us the entire length of the show? And I
Yeah,
was like, who else we could rank is the defensive coordinators.
yeah.
And
That's
that becomes really interesting too, because it obviously has a massive effect. Philly, we don't know. Their DC, Jonathan Gannon,
yes,
left for Arizona. So, you got a year 1 DC there. Dan Quinn might be the best defensive coordinator in all of football,
yes,
in Dallas. Obviously, Wink is a bit of a wild card. Last year, a tremendous one in New York, but he's so
mm,
aggressive. And does he keep that, or does he have a little bit more trust in his team this year to
yeah,
play a little bit more solid? And then Jack is as solid as they come, and it has consistently been a top 10 to 15 defensive coordinator in terms of his defenses have been. And so when you try to rank those, or at least put that on these groups to rank the overall defense, I think it becomes really tough, because in some
yeah,
ways I trust Washington the most because I feel like I know what they are. Everyone else has these massive questions in wild card, type of scenarios. I guess Dallas kind of doesn't.
yeah,
But it becomes tough. I think Philly's the most talented, so I'd still probably, rely on the talent and have them figure it out. Dallas and Washington are then right there. I think New York's solid though, but they're probably
yeah.
4th. That's, I think, how I would rank it. But I'm curious what you think of the DC
In
question
terms
as
of
well.
defenses, yeah. So to me, Philly, I think, moves down a little bit. Just for my own, because I think, it'll be interesting to see what they do defensively. Last year, they were a very conservative defense that relied on their offense to hold the football a lot. And I think that defense is significantly elevated by the style of offense that they do run, right? So, in terms of just defense that kind of scares the living daylights out of you, Philly's a good group. But like Dallas, man, there were times where you're going into those games where you're watching film, getting ready, and you're just like, what is Dan doing here? Right? It's just like
Yeah.
they're disguising cover 2. It looks like, man, oh gosh, they're running all out blitz. And it wasn't, and they had the guys from a safety position, from a cornerback spot, from a rush standpoint. Now, again, their first and second down run defenders, like we talked about, aren't very good. But in terms of guys that can win one-on-one pass rushing attempts, like, that was an absolute nightmare for this team and for anybody they played against. And they slowed a little bit as the year went on. But I do think that group, when they are clicking and when they have a couple of good pass rushers, and again, that's a big question. Do they have the same stable of pass rushers? That's a pretty dangerous group. And then Wink last year did an excellent job. And I think adding 2, because Adoree gets healthy, Deontay Banks, probably the best pure man guy in the class in terms of draft. You say to yourself, like, now we can really rely on some of those pressure heavy schemes, get Dexter Lawrence in more one-on-one situations. It's a scary group, but I'd probably say, for me right now, it's probably, excluding Washington, and I'll add them in here in a second, but it's probably Dallas, and then it's a close between Philly because the coordinator thing for me, that's like the
Yeah.
coordinator thing is
And
a
like
big
Sean
deal.
Desai's very highly thought of.
Yeah.
The new guy coming in Philly, but
Just
like
haven't seen it,
I think it's fascinating, Logan, because I'm staring at the notes and it's like defensive tackles, we didn't put Dallas first. Edges, we
Yeah.
didn't put Dallas first. Linebackers, safeties, corners.
Yeah.
They're not first in any of these, but
Right.
it shows you the impact of like what it means to take, second and third in basically all of those and make it a cohesive unit. And
Yeah.
that's what Quinn does better than anyone else in this division. And so I think Desai's good, but he hasn't done it, and he hasn't done it with this unit.
Yeah.
We have some massive question marks in Washington, obviously, in terms of Chase and his impact, positively or negatively.
Yeah.
And then, New York is probably the least talented in the division, but it's not by a lot, and
Right.
they're a bit of a wild card in how they organize things.
Yeah, I think so too. In terms of the defensive structure, like they are gambling every single time they're out there. So much pressure, really high stakes, and now you've got some players that are better at doing that. So does that elevate that group in the back end? I don't know, but yeah, I think it's probably, again, because the coordinator, it's probably Dan, and then I think Washington's in the mix, but to me the big cog there is Chase. Because if Chase develops, if it's not Chase, it's the development at key spots. It's the development of Forbes. It's the development of the young safeties. It's the development of Young, obviously. And if that happens, they could easily be the most talented
They could be a
team in the
top 5
division.
defense in football if that happens. If
And
Chase turns into a monster and the safeties develop and Emmanuel's good, they could be gross.
They could be gross. And I think Jack people sleep on Jack. Like when you watch Jack, like I go back to last year, and I think I might have said this on this show, but if I didn't, I'm just gonna bring it up here. So last year, Jack kind of set the template to beating Philadelphia's RPO system, and that's Jack doing that. That's good,
Right.
innovative defensive thinking. And so it's not like Jack is just out there, like playing football back when he, like in leather helmets. He's like thinking innovatively about football, how to put his guys in good positions to be successful. And I just think, to me, the question with this defense, and probably because we know it really well, is we're relying on a little bit of development at a lot of spots that could take them from a top 15 group to a top 5 group. And I think that's the big thing here. And it's the same thing with Philly, quite honestly, right? What's Jalen Carter? What's Nakobe Dean? How does the depth in the secondary work out for him, right? Like those are big questions. So I think it's the projection with some of those groups, while Dallas feels much more established. And for whatever reason, even though the Giants are not that talented, I feel like I know them really, really well. You know what I mean? I know what they be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. All right, that is Take Command for today. Second episode from us will come out in the podcast feeds later this week. If you joined us on the radio, hope you have enjoyed. Again, we do this twice a week during the off season, 3 times a week during the season. So make sure you are subscribed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the free Odyssey app. You can also watch us on YouTube at 1067 The Fan. For Logan Paulson, I'm Craig Hoffman, and we will see you next time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.